right? Like even maybe I'm wrong. Maybe climate change actually isn't real. Maybe there's evidence out there to support that, right?
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Inside Exchange. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing all about
things Yash.
Yep, all things Yash. Hello, my name is Brendan Nago,
I'm Colin.
and we're joined by guest.
I'm Yash Kothari.
Could you introduce yourself a little bit first?
I'm Yash Kothari. I'm a junior at Bellevue High School, where we're at right now.
Boring. Just lots more.
Yeah,
That's what I'm supposed to say.
Give
So,
us details.
Outside of school, or I guess first in school, I do a couple of extracurricular activities. I do debate, Model UN. I have my own club, which is Wall Street Club. We do like finance stuff. What else do I do?
Like
You don't
water
know
polo?
about yourself
No,
anymore?
there's like a lot of things I have to think about, right?
Like you're on like the water polo team.
Oh yeah, I'm the
right?
captain of the water polo team, so that's pretty cool. Outside of school, I do Boy Scouts. So right now I'm a Life Scout. I'm doing my Eagle Scout project right now. I actually just submitted it to for approval. We'll see what happens with that.
And I'm an Eagle Scout, but how many merit badges do you have, Yash?
The last time I counted, it was like over 90 or something like that. Like I have a decent amount. Yeah, I think that so for reference, if you don't know, the total amount of merit badges in Boy Scouts is like around 130, right, Brendan? Like something like that, 130. So I've cooled down recently, but I did a lot when I was younger, when I was in middle school and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
I'm an Eagle Scout, and I only have like 40 merit badges.
yeah. So again, for reference,
that's
the
crazy.
minimum for an Eagle Scout is like 21, or is it 22 now with citizenship and society?
Yeah, I think it's 22.
22, yeah.
Society.
So but you can choose to do as many extra as you want. How many palms do you have, Brendan?
I think I have 1, 2, 3. I think I have like 4.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about Boy Scouts. I'm involved in sustainability. So like Sustainability Ambassadors was one organization that I was a part of. I had an internship there over the summer. Then Bellevue Youth Council, I do that as well. I'm on an executive committee. That's like a voted in position by the city, and you manage administrative stuff with the city, policy stuff like that, as well as just like, for example, like last year we did like a homeless thing. We made like female hygiene kits, like I think more than 1,000 for a homeless shelter in Bellevue. So that's pretty cool. I guess overall I'm involved in some pretty cool stuff.
Okay, do you want to like touch a little bit about like your thoughts on sustainability and like opinions, and just also kind of like the work you do specifically?
Yeah. So I mean, in Bellevue, we're blessed to be in a part of, like, I guess the country, especially with the political situation nowadays, that like is really supportive of sustainability. So for reference, a lot of this stuff starts with a BSD policy that was passed in the summer of our freshman year, which was the first sustainability policy within the state of Washington, which is like for a school district, or it was passed by the school board, which allowed for like actual like sustainability teaching and curriculums. And so that's like kind of like the start of how I got involved in sustainability, because that policy allowed for this thing in the BSC called the Sustainability Committee, which was a committee formed by students and educators on how to implement the policy that was passed in a better way, and like how to implement it in the curriculum. And then sustainability ambassadors, like this, I guess the sustainability landscape in Bellevue is very like interconnected. Like all the organizations, all the nonprofits, they work with each other. The policies are all like interconnected from city to city, like cities model off of each other, which is really cool to see. So that's how I got my start into sustainability. Actually, technically speaking, my start was you had Mr. Litzenberger last year. You have Mr.
No,
Litz?
I had Mr. Vishner.
Do you have
Yeah,
Litz?
I have in mind.
Yeah, so Mr. Litz, for reference, Mr. Litzenberger is the AP teacher here at Bellevue, AP US History. So I had him last year, and he gave a recommendation for me to join Sustainability Ambassadors and to get involved in general in the sustainability space, which I feel is the situation for a lot of students. Mr. Litzenberger is pretty involved in Bellevue in the sustainability scene. So then I joined that, and then my friend Isaac Cho, I know Brendan Brendan knows
Green
him.
Collective, is that what you're talking about?
Green Collective. So he was starting that, and I joined him as like kind of like in the very beginning, and so that's been really cool to be a part of, because what we do is we go to schools around the district, and we're trying to expand across the state, and we teach them about sustainability in a more like hands-on way that I feel like a lot of people have trouble doing. And so that's pretty cool. So it goes to my point about the interconnectedness. Like Isaac started that independent of the BSD policy getting passed. And so, but then when the BSD policy got passed in the Sustainability Committee, there was a part of the committee that was dedicated to getting students involved. And so even though Isaac started it without having that policy in mind, we became like very like interconnected into that part of the policy. And then we got like some members that weren't even appointed to the committee got like of Green Collective got invited to be there and share their stories and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see how like all the sustainability elements kind of like weave together. At least that's my opinion, at least on the state in Bellevue and Washington.
What kind of teaching did you do in the Green Collective?
Yeah, so originally it started off more as like introductory lessons. Like, so for example, I remember one of the first ones I did was in Clyde Hill, like really basic. Like we're talking elementary school kids, right? So teaching them like what goes in the recycle, what goes in the compost. And the crazy thing is like it kind of sounds boring and like a little like stupid, a little kiddish, right? But I was learning stuff that I didn't even know. Like for example, like I think of the in the recycle lesson that we gave them, like there was like how you can't put like batteries in like the garbage recycle or compost. Like there's like special places like around Bellevue that you can, that you have to like especially like deposit your batteries for recycle. So I learned stuff that I didn't even know about. So it's stuff like that we
very interesting. Like my brother actually ran an entire project to collect batteries throughout like the city and turn them into proper disposal facilities, because you can't just trash them the like conventional way, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's another thing Green Collective was doing back in the early days. I think we still do it kind of now. Like we around schools we set up we call them battery boxes, where teachers can just deposit their used batteries and then we pick them up. And King County has these facilities where they recycle batteries, so we give the batteries to them. So yeah.
Why do you think like people don't already know that? Like we're not taught. Like when I was little, like I don't remember being taught this as well.
That's a pretty interesting like question. I think the answer is like the curriculum that we were exposed to of sustainability in the beginning was implemented in more of a symbolic way. Like it was like there wasn't a lot of content actually behind it. Like we were taught like very basic stuff, right? Like the 3 R's. What was it like?
Reuse, recycle,
something else. Reuse, recycle. That's all I remember. Like the 3 R's, something like that. Like, very basic like stuff. Not like a lot of the specifics, because I think the policies that were passed back then were really symbolic of like, oh, this is the first sustainability policy. Like, oh, we'll actually be teaching it to kids, right? In the same way that like when sex education was probably passed like in the 1990s and the 2000s, it was probably not as much of a comprehensive thing as it is now in schools. So in the same way, sustainability education has been progressing. So yeah.
Did you guys teach about like recycling, like certain things like aren't actually recycled? Like
yeah. Like certain things you can't actually recycle them. Like for example, I mean, it kind of sounds nitpicky, but like there are actual scientific reasons behind them. So like for example, think like napkins with like food garbage on them. You're technically not allowed to put that in the recycle because it could screw up the recycling like actual factories and like the machines that they use to recycle. So yeah.
Okay. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've done through like the council and?
Yeah, so kind of what I was talking about before, like one of the main things that I've done or been a part of was the female hygiene kit stuff. So last year I was a part of, so the way BYC or Bellevue Youth Council works is that it's an I don't want to call it an organization, but it's a subset of the city of Bellevue that's like required by law. Like the city of Bellevue passed laws that required it, and it's full of just kids. A couple of adults from the city oversee it. So I think it's like 100+ kids. They vote on their leaders, and then those leaders implement these things called action teams, which are like little like subsets of the subgroup that do specific things. So for example, there's a climate related action group, there's a homeless people related action group. And so the action group that I was a part of last year before I got on an executive committee, which is again the leader group that I was talking about, that action team worked on making female hygiene kits. So things like putting pads and tampons in like little Ziplocs and like toothbrushes, stuff like that. Making female hygiene kits for women and specifically like women's homeless shelters. So we made like a bunch of those throughout the year, and I think at the end of the year it was like more than 1,000. We gave them to female homeless shelters. So yeah, again, that was a pretty cool thing to be a part of. But like apart from that, like on executive committee now this year, my role has become more overseeing. So I don't really do a lot of the actual like work. It's more of like delegating people to do stuff like at the meetings, like being able to oversee the specific action teams. It's more of like an administrative role than an actually like hands-on thing. But still every once in a while, like for example, like the Bellevue Youth Council or the city of Bellevue technically hosts like awards at the end of the year, like a big award ceremony for kids that they believe are doing like good work. So I'm going to be like the one presenting that, or like one of the people on executive committee. So that's kind of what I do on UIC.
For sustainability, like what do you see as like included within it? Like, are you guys doing specifically recycling, or are you guys also doing sustainable like energy and that kind of stuff?
Like in what context? Like,
Like-
for Green Collective, BYC, what are we talking?
Just like in general,
Yeah.
what do you like? Do you
Like-
do it in like energy conservation, like like solar panels?
Yeah. So yeah, the example that I gave. So for green, let's talk about Green Collective. Like the recycling thing was like our first lesson. Then the next lesson I remember right after that we presented at Newport Hills, I believe, was an energy conservation one. So I remember specifically doing like solar panels, like right, just like you talked about. Then we had like water conservation, like how to do agriculture sustainably. Recently, we've been moving more to like oceans. Like we were doing, I think the last lesson I presented was like coral reefs at Bennett, or like how coral reefs are getting bleached. And before that, it was overfishing. So we cover like a broad subset of topics. Like in Green Collective, nothing specific. Our main goal, though, however, is to reduce waste specifically. So the thing that we focus on the most is waste management. Yeah.
Do you have any ideas about how the viewers themselves can actually improve their sustainability?
Yeah. So, I mean, off the top of my head, I can give a couple, but for a more comprehensive list, I know Sustainability Ambassadors, even though I'm not a part of it anymore, does have like a list on their website of things that every day, like 50 things I believe that people can do to reduce their carbon output, I guess, because that's the best way you can kind of measure sustainability or how sustainable you are. A couple of things that you can do, however, just for example, taking taking shorter showers. That's a big one. Reduces the amount of water you use. Turning off the lights when you leave the house. Like I, for one, have never did that in my life until I was actually like, or not. I did it, right? But like I didn't do it automatically. Like it wasn't a thing that I would just like turn off the lights in my room when I would leave my room, like even for like 5 minutes. But now I do it every time. Like it's just like instinct. I close the lights, close the door, right? So. It's like it's a lot of basic things, but they add up. But this is kind of like opinion. Can I add like opinion?
Yeah.
That I have about I do kind of feel though that like all these like measures that you can take as an individual don't really do much at the end of the day, because in my research, like for debate, like 99% of carbon emissions are, or like general bad for sustainability stuff, aren't produced by individuals. It's corporations, right? So, and that stuff isn't in our hands, it's in the government's hands. So, and not even just in the US, like the majority of carbon emissions and bad sustainability stuff comes from Asia, like China and India. So it's a lot of it is kind of out of our control. And I think a big part of like being able to think that you're doing stuff as an individual is just complacency. It's making yourself feel better about the situation when in reality you're not really doing much. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, so I have a quick question about that in terms of the corporation. So I know you have a big interest in international business. How does that connect to sustainability?
Can you be more specific? That's like really broad. Really broad.
Okay. Like, how does working in international business have a direct connection to sustainability and performing these actions in order to better our planet?
Yeah. So one of the big things that I've been looking into recently, and it comes in the form of like carbon credits. You guys know are you guys familiar with those things? Yeah. So like in international business now, it's become like almost commonplace to try to offset your carbon emissions, right? Like a lot of companies especially big tech companies are always trying to tout how they're like, trying to go carbon like neutral by 2050 or 2040. And the way that they do these things, it's created a new market. Like you could think of it as kind of like a stock market where these things called carbon credits are like traded basically. And what carbon credits are is like you buy them, and for buying that, like for example, buying one carbon credit, that'll offset 1 kilogram of carbon emissions.
It's like they use the money to like invest in like forest rehabilitation or something.
Yeah. So let's say you're Microsoft, you want to go carbon neutral by like 2050. Technically, you don't really have to reduce your emissions. You could just buy a bunch of carbon credits that like offsets your entire carbon emission output, and then you would be carbon neutral, right? So it's kind of cheeky, but like it is a way in international business to get around because now as sustainability becomes an issue that's more on the forefront of social media, it actually becomes like more of a marketing tool. Like for example, like shops, like especially in Bellevue, you might have noticed like shops tout themselves being sustainable. Like people will shop at grocery stores that are like farm, like safe farms, or like grass-fed beef, stuff like that, right? Like So sustainability, as it becomes more of at the forefront of people's mind, it actually becomes I think a bigger part of marketing and a huge part of international business.
What is your thoughts on these new and upcoming like offset your emissions? And like when you're on the plane, I always see this advertisement that's like offset your carbon. What's your thoughts on all of that?
Okay. I think it's good for business because, I mean, just in general, it creates another subset of the economy. Now you have like people whose jobs are solely devoted to maintaining these markets. But on the flip side, I think it's a little cheeky. It's a little stupid because it's kind of like it's a little like hypocritical. And I think again it fosters that sense of like complacency, but like at the end of the day, I do think it's a net good compared to like the situation before. Because I mean, at least you're trying to offset. Because especially again with the political situation nowadays, like without the sustainability being like on the forefront of people's minds and being a marketing tool, without that, corporations wouldn't care about sustainability at all without any laws in place, right? So it's better than nothing. But I think there's definitely more work to be done into making like an actual like thing, because in the research that I've done, it's very rare that you see these carbon credits that are bought and the investment that money goes towards actually end up doing anything. So that's yet to be seen. It's a new market, so we'll see. But yeah,
Who do you think is like most responsible for like sustainability?
for example, like in the world.
Like for example, like in this district, like you see a lot of people like when you drive on like the sidewalks and stuff, there's a lot of trash everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like people just not throwing their stuff in the trash, which I think is pretty.
Yeah.
weird.
I mean, I guess that's more, in my opinion, that's more sort of like anecdotal. I mean, Bellevue in general is a very clean place, so maybe there are some streets that are like really dirty.
No, I mean, like in like Bellevue High School, like this.
like in the school.
Yeah, for example.
Like, have you seen the bathrooms?
I mean, who's responsible for it? Like, I mean, it's us, right? But like, I think in general, like sustainability, if you look at it overall, that like ends up being like a very small part of like what sustainability is, right? Like a little bit of trash in the bathrooms isn't actually gonna do anything like at the end of
But
the
like
day.
if everyone, it's like every school has like just people just throwing the trash outside, like there's been this like garbage.
No. I agree that it's a thing that like kids should be responsible for. That's why like part of what we do at Green Collective is that like, for example, at lunch, making sure people throw stuff, like actually throw it away and not just like leave it in the cafeterias. It's just my opinion that it's not that big of like an issue that it's made out to be. I think corporations have helped make this like idea that individuals are the ones responsible for the world being the way that it is, when in reality it's government and the corporations that actually
it's
are.
like if someone were to be perfectly neutral, like they were to emit zero carbon, they'd only like change like 1 second of like actual industrial like.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It's not actually doing anything on the
So
world scale.
what do you think could be done to corporations like about this?
I think the government has to come in and step in. I mean, it's pretty simple, like economics, right? Like if a market's creating negative externality, then the government's the one responsible to go step in, right? But
But the problem with these negative externalities is it's not just about the nation; it's about the entire world, right?
yeah,
And-
exactly.
And how can you like somehow achieve this carbon neutral idea?
Yeah.
when
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
Only being regulated by one country. That's only going to affect a little bit. Of the
And that's
negative
a
externality.
big problem, I think, specifically in the U.S. because politicians have this thing of like, okay, well, if everybody's not doing it, if China's not passing these laws, then it doesn't actually end up mattering, right? It's like if I'm a Republican president, right? Like let's say I'm Trump, I'm not going to put my political capital into convincing other Republicans to sign any sort of climate conservation bill, even if I cared about it, because I know that China is not going to do anything similar, and it's going to end up being a drop in the bucket regardless. But I think the problem with that is actually like empirically, again, in my research, what I've seen is that passing those bills and doing that work actually creates like competition between great powers. So for example, one example I can give is are you guys familiar with the Inflation Reduction Act?
No.
The IRA?
a little bit.
I think.
Yeah,
Biden put
a
like
little
$2 billion or something.
Yeah, so it was passed in 2021 when the Democrats still had a majority in the Senate, I believe. And so, or had a 50-50 Kamala Harris tie-breaking vote, majority in the Senate, whatever. And so it was the largest climate investment passed in history by the U.S. And so the U.S. lawmakers only ended up passing that bill. Some Democrats were only convinced because they were scared of China catching up to them in climate, because the year before Xi Jinping had authorized this program that was trying to shift away from China's coal power plants and move towards more climate conservation. So in my experience, empirically, competition between great powers like China and the U.S. and passing these laws, even if you believe it might only be a drop in the bucket, actually like spurs other countries to model off of you. But again, I think it also comes down to your constituents. But like even if Trump knows that like, oh, passing this bill, even if my constituents may think it only might be a drop in the bucket, China will maybe like they'll be like scared. They'll be like, oh my God, the U.S. is catching up to this. They'll pass their own bill. It doesn't matter, because the problem is the people of the U.S. are not smart enough to think about all that, and they don't know that. So they'll just be like, oh, why are we wasting money on this? I don't care. I'm not going to vote for you. So it doesn't end up doing anything. Politicians are never held accountable. But
I mean, yeah, the thing is for consumers, right? Like if a business were to be more clean, they would invest in like solar panels without. Like right now, there's not that many people. Like those technologies are relatively expensive because there's not that many people buying them in the first place.
Yeah.
Like solar panels are expensive. So if a business were to try to be more clean, right, it would affect consumers because prices have to go up and like people just aren't willing to pay the price for that.
Yeah, exactly. I think it just comes down to the people of the nation, right? Like I think we care more about the short term costs than we do about the long term ones. I mean, I think there's an argument, like for example, this guy kind of like sidetrack, but like in research, like tariffs are usually used as a tool to like retaliate against like in a trade war, for example. And a lot of the research that's been done says that like in the short term it raises costs, but in the long term it helps bring industry back to the country, right? Yeah. But I think a lot of what people care about right now is in general it's the short term cost, which is why consumers, even if they know that like climate change past like 1.2 degrees Celsius is like it's unfixable, right? Like people will die from climate change past 2 degrees. Right now we're past 1.5 degrees Celsius. Even if they know that, they don't care because if they have to pay like $1 more for their groceries or something like that, that matters more to them in the short term. That's the reference that I was making.
What do you think about like people being uneducated about climate change? Because a lot of people who just don't care about the scientific evidence and just think that, oh, it's 2 degrees Celsius. Like a lot of people don't understand how much 2 degrees actually is. But they're like, oh, 2 degrees is just nothing. Like they look at the temperature outside, it's like, oh my God, it's snowing in February. It's so cold. It's just getting colder. Like it's just good. It's just good.
I think it's stupid because, and it doesn't even take like, I don't even think you needed like a lot of intelligence to know about these things. Like you could, literally with one Google search on Google Scholar, you can find like the most comprehensive like research article that will tell you like the reason why it's getting colder and like these polar vortexes are coming down from the Arctic and giving us snow in like March is because of global warming. Like it's not in opposition to it. It doesn't really take a lot of effort. I think it's, again, people trying to be like willfully ignorant, like just not caring. And unfortunately, that's how humanity is.
It's something to do with like more misinformation, like the media they consume, right? If they consume every single day the media that's saying climate change doesn't exist, oh my God, this and that.
Yeah, but I almost feel as if like the media doesn't even have like I agree, the media definitely fosters like a lot of this misinformation, but I think at this point in the like 2025 where we are with climate change, like how it's almost universally like if you go on the street, you ask someone, is climate change real? Like in most parts of the country, they'll almost always say yes, right? It just comes down to like if you want to be like willfully ignorant, or if you want to be like smart or normal person, I guess, not even like smart. Like I think now it's like not even a thing of just being misinformed, it's just trying not to be informed. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Because climate change is like that obvious right now.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you think that is important about on this topic?
I mean, there's a lot of current events that are significant to it.
Would you like to talk about any of them?
Yeah, like, do you have any like final thoughts or like?
I mean, I think like, for example, like Trump pulling out of the Paris Accords. Like I'm not being political. I'm just saying like the Paris Accords are like a good.
So what was the Paris Accords doing in the first place?
So the Paris Accords is basically like it was signed by I think 193 countries, and it was kind of this guideline that was like the first major like comprehensive, apart from the Stockholm. I forget what it's called, but I think like the Stockholm Act or something like that. The Stockholm Accords that were passed back in the 1990s about like the ozone layer. If you guys know, like the ozone layer was being depleted like really bad, right?
Hole, right?
And then we like fixed it. Like the international community like got together. We banned I forget what they're called, but the things that
Teflon something.
No, not Teflon's the thing that keeps pans from being sticky.
Teflon.
It's the thing that's in spray, like PHP or something. Yeah, something like that like comes out of aerosol cans. It's aerosol.
Like refrigerators as well, right?
Yeah. And so like in hairspray and stuff like that. So that got banned, and the ozone layer it's back now. Like we're good and we're healthy. So in the same way, the Paris Accords was meant to be that, but for like climate change. Like, and so it set out like these guidelines. Like for example, the guidelines that I was talking about before, like 1.5 degrees Celsius from at the average above the global average. That is like they wanted to avoid that as much as possible. So they said that we'd make every effort to avoid 1.5 degrees Celsius. And then 2 degrees Celsius is like unfixable. It's you can't come back from it. And we've now in 2025 we've passed 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we're trending.
We already did?
Yeah, we passed it, and now we're trending towards 2 degrees Celsius. So Trump got us out of the Paris Accords. again. That was one of his executive orders. And again, I don't think the Paris Accords was necessarily like the best piece of legislation. Like it was again more of like a symbolic thing. It led to like more investments in other sectors. But in the same way, like what I was talking about before, like for example, sustainability curriculum when we were in elementary school might not have been the best, right? Like we didn't get the specifics. The legislation that was passed to make that stuff happen might not have been the best, but it was a step in the right direction that causes these other dominoes to fall. Like now we have students like myself and like Isaac Green Collective that are doing these things that like educate students on top of what's already in the curriculum, right? So in the same way, I think the Paris Accords was a step in the right direction. A lot of these sustainability bills that are passed by the government are steps in the right direction. You just need time for those dominoes to fall. So you need both sides of the aisle, like Republicans and Democrats, to be united on the issue so that when one person comes in office and one person comes out, that agenda doesn't get split and we don't end up getting our progress reset. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What went wrong with the Paris Accords? Like the goal was to get below 1.5, but why are we already here? Like
well, first of all, international law isn't like binding. So that's like step number one. Like things that the UN says, you can't necessarily hold a country to them. It's the reason why organizations like Interpol, like stuff like that, aren't necessarily the most effective. But I think on top of that, I think it's just governments like it's just political like ineffectiveness, like to being able to capitalize on those things. Like I mean, I think the U.S. is the culprit for a lot of it because Paris Accords are passed in 2015 or 2016, I believe. So Obama's on his way out, can't do anything because the House is conflicted, right? In his second term, he did barely anything because the Republicans had control of Congress. And so Trump comes in. Obviously, he's not going to do anything. He's a Republican. Biden comes in. He actually does some stuff. He gets the IRA passed. But then, again, the Republicans come over. They take over Congress. He can't do anything.
That's pretty true.
Yeah, we have to be, like, united on the issue. Yeah. Then... like at least agree on something, right? Like even maybe I'm wrong. Maybe climate change actually isn't real. Maybe there's evidence out there to support that, right? But if that's the case, then everybody has to be like united on that thing. We can't like split up our progress like section by section and just inevitably end up doing nothing. That's like the worst case scenario.
There's like this idea like not in my backyard, like where we're trying to take steps in the right direction for sustainability. We're making like nuclear reactors or something. Like they're like. They're really safe, but people are saying like you can build them, but just not in my backyard.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think domestic. It's nice that you brought up nuclear. I think domestic nuclear power plants are probably like one of the best ways to get energy. But like we're just so scared of them, like that we don't do them, and people don't want them built near their backyards the same way you don't want landfills near you.
I mean, they're like clean energy, but the problem is if you look at Fukushima, it's like
exactly,
it's not good.
Yeah, so there's a lot of there's like stigma around it, but like
same with like flying. Like people used to be like, oh my god, flying is so dangerous, but like in reality, flying is super safe.
Yeah, like the likelihood of you dying from a plane crash is less than you dying when you drive, which is actually kind of insane. You're more likely to die getting to the airport than you are actually in the air.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any other messages you want the viewers to know?
Don't be ignorant, I guess. Be smart. Be educated.
Okay, thank you. That has been a good episode of the Thai podcast, and now I'd like to thank Yash Kothari for coming out here. Thank you for watching.
Cool.